Hey, this is Joe, and this is the build video for the Hobbit House. If you haven't already watched the tour, I would advise that you begin with that, and then come back and watch this build. It's a relatively long video, but I decided to include it all in one because it simply wasn't enough interior to justify doing two videos. First thing you start out with is your basic upstairs area, and because of the shape of the roofs, you can't have a very large area. But I was actually surprised in my initial model that I created to test the house before recording the final one, and of course also to test my textures. I actually found that I could actually make a fairly large area, but at a bit of a sacrifice. I lost some of the flat slopes of the rear of the roof. However, I did gain more usable space. So this is the beginning of the above ground area, which is really under the hill. I used a hexagon piece there because I thought it would add a bit of variance to the hill. Most of it is actually hidden with additional roofs that I added. I used quite a few of the round domed ones, and then simply either raised them or lowered them to create sort of valleys and ditches and so forth between the joining parts to try and break up the ridges. No hill ever has these sharp ridges. And I feel that I may have actually gone overboard with creating too many roofs, interlocking roofs. The last one perhaps was too much, but however, it did create a very nice sloping hill, and that created the effect I was looking at. I pretty much realized that I would not be able to use, and here's the final piece, pretty much realized I wouldn't be able to use the back of the house at all. It would really just be for show. So I created an incredibly shallow pyramid-shaped roof, just really to bring the corners of the hills down and sort of slope them up to the main part of the hill. This takes quite a lot of adjusting, and also pulling out the eaves so that the eaves actually go into the soil, but not so much that they appear in the front. They actually give, and then with painting the textures, the matching textures on the ground with the terrain paint, it actually helps to blend. But because of the way the lighting is done in the Sims, the roofs never quite match. In fact, if you place the same roof on the third floor and then on the second floor and then on the ground floor like these are, they're actually different shades. It seems to have more light higher up, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it, which is why I actually created the textures in two different variants, so that if you use a roof like this on the ground level, that it's closer to the matching terrain paint and of course the floor tiles of the same texture. And as I said, I think I may have used one too many roofs in creating the slopes, but this was great fun, and I actually advise anybody give this a bash. It's not the most playable of houses, but it's definitely fun. And for the most part, a lot of the roof is actually cut away when you actually inside. The lounge, however, suffers from heel intrusion and cannot actually really be played with the walls up. But of course, once the roofs and the walls drop away, then it's fine. The next step was to create a matching basement at the top and the bottom, so I could break through and create the cutout of what is sort of like a valley come hill. And this is why most of this house is really a basement build. First I thought, well, it was a bit harsh, so I thought, let me just cut away the walls a little bit, create a slightly softer, more ergonomic. One thing that's really missing in the Sims is the Sims 4, well, in all the Sims, is really a way to soften up the rounds, the harsh angles of corners. It would be so great here to be able to apply, even if it was just on a purely modular 1 tile or 4 tile size, actually apply a rounded wall onto those corners just to give it a bit more ergonomic feel to it. Sometimes cutting basements and modifying them can be quite tricky, and it takes ages to try and get it to link up and match up, but there you have it. Once the basement is opened up to the open air, then you've got to start the laborious task of deleting all the walls. I really wish there was a way of just saying, well, just delete all of them, remove all the walls from this room. For those of you that don't know much about basements, this basement, well, it's not a basement. If it's above ground, it's no longer a basement. But the room above that I removed all the walls, still remains a room, except that it hasn't got a floor, it hasn't got a ceiling, and of course it hasn't got a wall. So that's a very strange sort of room, but that's what's needed in order to make the cutout to bring the basement up to open it up to the air. Then here I'm actually trying to get the basement to copy the exact floor plan above into the basement, but it just won't copy it. You have to have some sort of block there already, and then suddenly it recognizes, oh, this is the basement. I can copy from above and place it below. Maybe I'm softening up the edges a bit. By the time the rocks and all the foliage is in place, it actually softens up quite a bit and gives a very, very realistic look. In fact, it actually was more successful than I'd actually anticipated, so I'm very pleased. And there's a gratuitous view of the trees. I chose a lot that is very close to the trees and the hills, and the camera is continuously zooming and out and going off into the hills, or looking straight at the floor, which is of course what I need to do when I'm working on something else. These scalable rocks really are just so useful. I wish there was a few more variants of them, and the textures weren't so bad at such a large, scale. I may actually attempt to reskin them and retexture these rocks with a higher quality texture, so that when they are scaled so high, the texture isn't quite as sort of soft focused look. They're not designed to be so large. The strangest thing is, what was Maxi thinking when they designed this? Of course we are going to do this. We cannot level terrain, so of course we are going to use rocks to create hillsides. So this is me trying to soften the hillside along the edges, because those bits of roofs, the eaves actually extend right over the boundary of the property, which is nice in a way because it makes the edges a little bit more organic. One thing I don't like about the Sims in general is it's very difficult to blend the edge of the lot into the surroundings, and the rest of the terrain is really quite an odd looking grass. And it's also oversized. Look at the leaf patterns on the ground, so a bit annoying. It'd be nice if we actually go in and just recolor, at least use terrain paint on the immediate surrounding areas to actually make it blend. That's actually a bench, but I thought, well, it may be usable. I'm not entirely sure, but it creates such a nice effect that I had to use a larger one. What's better than something good? A bigger one. Because most of these rocks and that are actually inside the roof area, they don't actually interfere with the actual interior of the house, because they're actually just poking through into the roof spaces. So they're actually in the attic. You've got rocks in the attic, greenery and rocks in the attic. Sounds like a crazy eccentric person would live here. But of course I did actually create an archaeologist, he's a little bit wacky, so he will in fact be the perfect resident for this house. There we go, trying to blend in, delete and add, and delete and add, and delete and add, and trying to blend the edges in so that you don't get this harsh line when you're in gameplay. The success is always in the details, but it's so difficult. It'll be fantastic if you could take the erase brush for the terrain paint and actually run it softly along the edge, but it just reports an error. Can't paint outside the lines, as if nobody at Maxi ever heard of painting outside the lines. But anyway, this is going to be what turned out to be quite a successful little fountain. There you actually see the terrain paint blending in up against the big pyramid roof, if you remember, quite well. It actually blends in quite well, and that's because I used different colors for the roofs. So if they're actually on the ground, the terrain matches actually very, very closely. Add a little bit of browns, add a few rocks, a few trees, and you have a Hobbit Shire. This corner was just so difficult. Eventually I actually fixed it off camera, because it was just, for some particular reason, the rocks just would not go into place. I had the biggest effort in trying to get these rocks placed. I think it's because they are quite close to the perimeter of the property, and they just will not go any closer. More rocks. Some of them are even inside the house. I actually considered leaving some of the rockery inside the house and turning it into a feature, but there was actually such a tiny sliver of rock that I actually did a diagonal. Later on you'll see I did a diagonal wall to actually just chop out the rock, just to leave it outside, because it wasn't enough of a rock to be deliberate, and it was just silly. I need to create some other textures other than these for sort of rock basements, because these really just don't look particularly good. But for this build, that's all I had. By the time the greenery goes on, it looks quite good. And of course, this is, you know, what would be a house build overlooking a basement without a nice little porch. I suppose it's not a porch, it's a veranda really. I love these little roofs, and they really go quite well, but they don't provide much light. So I actually ended up trying different windows and actually adding in windows and actually changing and realizing that I had a window intersecting the room. Half of it was in the eaves and half of it was in the bedroom. So I removed them and changed things up a little bit. And if you have a balcony, why not have a bigger balcony? I decided that this sort of window, box window would work quite well with the whole look, and it actually does. It actually sells the look of the Hobbit house quite well. Well, of course, putting down chimneys is quite something. You can't see below, you can't see above, then the roof gets in the way, and you can't put the roof up and you can't put the roof down, and then the chimney snaps to the roof plane, then it snaps to the ground plane. But there we go, finally the chimneys are in place. Now it's time to start planting these trees. And by some magic, the fully grown trees are just in place in no time at all. Of course, the trees were the easiest part. That trying to get the plants to go up the hill, technically, which is a roof, is quite tricky. And getting them to blend and not look like they're just floating, because while Lord of the Rings is fantasy fiction, it still doesn't defy gravity. So here we go. This is maidenhair fern that I just placed towards the right-hand side. It's just so large. It's absolutely massive. I don't know. Somebody was not paying attention when they created that fern for the game. This is literally just filling in the gaps and bringing up. I decided that this would be the garden, the proper wild sort of built-up garden area would be at the back, because the Sims can't really do anything here. You can't place any furniture. You can hardly walk here because of the roof, and of course then all the different objects in that. I did find that the Jack Russell loves running behind the rocks and then just disappears there. God knows what he finds of interest behind the rocks. Perhaps there are some Shire rabbits that he's chasing behind the rocks. Flowers, more flowers, because we all remember the Shire as being so green and so pastoral and so peaceful compared to the rest of the movie and the books as well. For those of you that haven't read the books, Lord of the Rings, you should at some point read them. They really are. I read them when I was, I think, 13, and I won't tell you how many decades ago that was. I won't tell you because, quite honestly, I don't think I can do the maths that far back. I like those blue mushrooms. I thought that adds a little bit of a magical touch. Bringing a little bit of the Lord of the Rings magic with blue mushroom stalls. And there we go. Positioning some plants on the roof. And up and down and up and down, and making sure that they don't look like they're floating, at least when the roof is up. Of course, when the roof is down, you've just got a flower arrangement hovering in the air. And I just thought this just sold the look so well, especially on this side, which is not really particularly playable. I loaded it up quite a bit with flowers and plants, which is why I said that it probably didn't really need these additional roof sections here, because it could have been just sold with the plants. The effect would have been pretty much the same. The trouble with the Move Objects cheat enabled is that you can literally place anything anywhere, but you don't always notice. I found a magic floating bookcase when I was about to shoot the cinematics for the house. I had to go in and delete this floating bookcase. It was just floating in this black oblivion. in the basement. I had tried it to see what it would look like, and it accidentally got placed, and it was lost behind the other bookcases. I love these trees. I thought they're just so Hobbit-like, aren't they? Sort of very character fantasy driven, and they just work perfectly with the Hobbit House. There's a few more plants which are, may need to be removed with regular gameplay. But interestingly enough, they actually don't get in the way nearly as much as I had thought they would. And even this rock just doesn't really seem to get in the way. On the more steep slope, it's quite difficult to get plants to look natural. I found that the trick with putting plants on these slopes is to actually leave them half in the roof and half out, so that it actually appears as if the stems of the plants and the flowers and so forth are actually coming through out of the grass. If you bring them up too much, they just appear as if they're floating. And levitating plants were not part of the Lord of the Rings, or even the Hobbit. And then it was time to add some roof trim. I had actually applied the roof trim in the original test house, and I'd actually forgotten on this one. And I found that this one tends to actually work quite well, the muted browns. I also find the roof trims are far too shiny. So there's sort of very few that are kind of matte and rock looking, a little bit of texture with terrain paints. I actually almost regretted not having used just normal tiles here, because it just took so long to try and blend the grass, and it never works 100% to blend the lawns plus some of the soil textures. But by the time you stick more plants on it, half of it is hidden anyway. It's really just a stage for the production. These two rocks in the front really lend the look of almost like a cave, proper Hobbit Shire. There's some more Maiden's hair fern, which is the size of a house for some bizarre reason. It should be called Giant's Maiden hair fern. Oops, there goes the game a little bit nuts. It is so annoying when the game just... One thing that Maxi really should have done, Electronic Arts really should have made the trees drop in the neighborhood, so that especially when you're building or you are on that side, you don't end up on top of a tree. If you back up into a tree with the camera, you end up on top of the tree, and then it looks at the sky, then it looks at the ground, it looks at everywhere except where you're trying to work. And anybody who's tried to build these unusual sort of houses come up against this. And of course, it's just wants to snap to the wall and not to the eaves. More rocks, because what does a roof need? Well, more rocks. More rocks are better. I really could have gotten carried away and actually landscaped the entire roof until I realized that it was just going to make the house unplayable to have a fully landscaped roof. And of course, more rocks. And I thought I need to put a trim in, and I thought this sort of castle-like fence actually just goes so well with the whole theme. More trouble with placing rocks. This is a second attempt at trying to get the rocks to just blend in with the basement. I love creating these basements with open-air basements that are sort of appear to blend in with the above-ground section, so that it creates a hill or a valley. It's the one thing I really miss from the other Sims games, is the ability to change the terrain. I know why the Maxi decided to prevent this, and that with this new game engine that they used for Sims 4, it would lead to a whole lot of really freaky things happening if you were allowed to change the terrain. So they just basically just prevented it. I do hope that in the next Sims they will continue along the path that they've taken with the Sims 4, but allow terrain alterations. I was trying to make this this pond blend so that it didn't look like a fountain and more like a pond. And of course, what do you need? Well, more rocks. I don't think Electronic Arts ever planned that these rocks would be so used and abused, but they're just so useful. And because I really wish that there were a few more different types, but they're just perfect for bordering things, giving things the sort of natural look. I think we have to clean that pond though, all those corners and crevices and rocks. But of course, this is The Sims, so some magic elves come in from the Shire and clean up the pond. More Maiden's hair fern, oversized just for kicks. Trying out a few different trees. What I didn't want to create, because this is the sort of blockages to the house. There are already so many obstacles with the roofs and things that I actually wanted to keep most of the trees and shrubbery quite low so that they wouldn't interfere with actually seeing the house. Because quite honestly, could have gone quite nuts and just planted a whole lot of trees, but then you wouldn't see the actual house itself. More terrain painting, trying to blend it in, using the same green texture that I use on the roof, but on the ground. I really wish I could go in and modify the surrounding terrain of the town, I suppose you'd call it, and just use these green. I mean, this is actually grass. This very bizarre leafy pattern, oversized leafy pattern that's in the neighborhood is just really ugly. Of course, the Shire wouldn't be complete without a bit of worn paths where they all walk. There's some more trees getting in the way. I thought this was really a house where you'd really sit and sort of ponder quite a bit and look out over the hills and consider who has that ring and how can I get my hands on that ring. I must have my precious. So I thought this whole outdoor area really is quite a reflective place where you would sit and meditate. And of course, ponder where that ring is. There's probably nobody should give me that ring. Probably the one person that should not have the ring of power. But boy, what fun that would be. I love these hanging plants, but sometimes they can be quite tricky to place so that it looks quite realistic. So they don't look like they're hovering, and also to try and hide those suspended hanging planters that where these ferns grow from. I quite like the idea of thinking that they sort of just grow from the outside and then pour in. I wish you could actually position them further in on the walls, but it is just so difficult that here you can actually see that they just tend to snap to walls, and it's just almost impossible to get them to go to where it would look realistic. There's the obligatory chess set, because all hobbits like to play chess. It's just one of those things. Makes them very intelligent. Looking for some game textures, trying to match up with the walls. Being a Hobbit house, it has to be fairly rustic. And there's the instant lawn. You just pour it down and you have this neatly groomed lawn. I'm rather pleased how they turned out. They look very, very real. I'm going to be using them in more sort of ecological builds and greenhouses. Well, green as in ecologically friendly houses and so forth. I actually intend to do more of this sort of thing in basements with green roofs, but not nearly as complex as this Hobbit house. I wanted them to be able to get to that corner because there's actually a bench there. There's a rockery bench. So I wanted to cut away a bit of the swimming pool, but I also wanted the swimming pool to look a little bit more like more like a well almost. Didn't want it to look too much like a swimming pool. But I love swimming pools, so I'd put one in every single house if possible. I do miss having my own swimming pool. My waistline is proof that I no longer swim. More rocks, because that's what we need. I love move objects cheat enabled. Just the things that you can do that you can't without it enabled is just something else. So they add a couple of modern touches of the barbecue, or a braai, as we say in South Africa. And I thought, well, that balcony is definitely going to need some support. More shrubbery, which of course, because there's actually a green floor, there's a sort of the lawn, the plants on the basement floor actually look real, and it actually looks like they belong there. They don't just look odd. I don't know why we can't use the terrain paint. And there we go, working again on the swimming pool and the fountain. It'd be interesting if we could combine the looks of the fountain but with the swimming pool, or actually combine the two so that they actually look like one and the same, where the Sims could swim in part of the swimming pool and the fountain side of it would be just for show. And I thought, at the latest part of the game, I realized, well, there's only one way into the basement, and that's through the bedroom. So I thought, well, let me put in a nice rock stone staircase in the back to prevent complete strangers walking through the bedroom. These trees do seem to grow very well in the basement, don't they? Matching floors. Yeah, this is where I decided, oops, I've actually got windows in the eaves and halfway through the eaves and halfway into the bedroom. So I had to change that. Because there are very few windows to the outside, I actually used what you can see, those rectangles and squares, some invisible lighting to help light up the place so that it wouldn't be so dark and gloomy. Well, I suppose it would be in keeping, but it's no fun to play a house that is very dark. And of course, Sims tend to be very cranky when they don't have enough light. So I'm looking for a Hobbit bed. Of course, there isn't one, so I thought, well, he's an archaeologist, so a castle bed would be in keeping. I wish it was this easy to build in real life. As an architect, I can tell you, if we could just simply push and pull these rooms and just within seconds have the floor tiles and the wallpapers and everything just stretch, would just be fantastic. In fact, I don't think any of us would ever stop redecorating our houses. And there we go, trying to get the rock out of the bathroom. If it had protruded enough, it would have made an interesting wall feature, but it just didn't. It was just, and I didn't want to move it because it completes the look outside. I wasn't going to dare touch those rocks because they'd really go berserk. There we go. The joys of sim building. There's the forest wallpaper, which I've become very fond of. I should probably stop using it. The one drawback of using these roofs as hills is that on the gable wall, which is technically the gable wall, which you see on the two facades of the house, the balcony and the entrance, it's actually the gable wall. If you wallpaper the inside of the house on that wall, it automatically wallpapers the outside of the house too, which is a bit annoying. So I thought, well, it adds a bit of character to have some stone walls inside the house as well. Try to keep it very Hobbit-like, but I don't really know. Does anybody know? Leave a comment below. What do you think Hobbit bathrooms were like? We never really got to see a Hobbit bathroom in The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit. And Tolkien never really told us. This is the very important detail that, in 1,000 pages he failed to neglect to tell us. What do Hobbit bathrooms look like? Well, this is how my Hobbit bathroom looks like. There we go, extending and poking and pulling and pushing. I actually made the bedroom slightly smaller because it was a little bit oversized, and I just had a corner that I couldn't do anything with, so when all else fails, pull the walls and remove the space. One thing that's a lot better in Sims 4 is things do match a little bit better. For the most part, they're just like these cupboards. There should be a similar color. There should be a similar wood grain, but they're not. So that things never quite match, which is very, very frustrating. It's a lot better than in the earlier Sims games. Sims 1 was plagued with horrible items that just didn't match. These candles just would not go onto the mantelpiece. So move the fireplace, put it back, put the candles in place, and then move it back. Those look like really comfortable, cozy chairs. Just sit by the fireplace and read. Remove those sections. And then we need a little bit of art. I thought, well, what sort of art would an archaeologist have? Because we've established that a real hobbit doesn't live here. He didn't pay rent, so we had to evict him. So I thought, well, what kind of decor? It must have some sort of decor. Perhaps this is sort of fairly classical, but this is an archaeologist, so. And there's these travel bags doubling up as a side table. And there's his trunks, of course. He hides all his precious artifacts in there. Keeps them under lock and key, so when the pesky neighbors come over with their pies and things to welcome him into their neighborhood, they're not rifling through all of his priceless artifacts. One thing I did notice is that these chairs seem to be a little odd-sized. I want to have a header chair and fancier chair on either end of the table, and then plainer chairs down the side. But those plainer chairs just seem to be horribly oversized. And this was a mission. What kind of kitchens and what kind of cabinets would a hobbit have? Well, they're not available in The Sims, so that's the best I could do. I changed it several times. Not sure why I chose this orange and green color, but it just sort of started out as a base to create something. Again, this doesn't actually come in proper wood textures. I mean, Bilbo Baggins and Frodo would have had wooden cabinetry, but I couldn't find anything that was sort of old-fashioned enough. And of course, they would have had a wooden microwave as well. Needless to say. There, I thought, well, I need a bathroom upstairs. All the guests are going to be going downstairs into the bedroom, so I wanted to put a small functional bathroom upstairs that all the guests can use. Again, sort of about as hobbit as it gets in The Sims. And there's a log shower, which I, of course, absolutely love. You can be sure you'll never see one of those again in my build unless when I eventually get around to doing the log cabin build, I'll probably revisit that shower. And a nice interest mat so that the guests can wipe their feet. And a bit of bric-a-brac, trying to keep it sort of very rural. Those copper pots really just look terrible, don't they? They don't look copper at all. Some of the textures just aren't very well done. And I thought some sunflowers would liven up the interior. I did notice a particular bug. Well, it's not really a bug, it's just a difficulty, is when you place paintings, because you can't have the walls up because the roof is in the way, you constantly have to work with the walls down. Once you place the paintings, well, they disappear. They only reappear when you pick another painting, and then you can't pick that painting. I'm just painting in some terrain painting under the eaves, so that when you see it with the walls down, it looks a bit more natural. And adding some lighting. I kind of like this yellowish light that these lamps give off. Unfortunately, they don't quite match the garden lamps, so I ended up with a mixed white halogen light and these old-fashioned yellow lighting. Could somebody create some hacked objects with some interesting garden lighting that isn't halogen for these old-fashioned builds? Thank you. Ah, there's the magic mushrooms. Probably need to keep the Jack Russell away from those. More lighting. Oh, that bench had to be moved. Wasn't quite in the right position. And I thought, well, I've already got a whole lot of plants on the roof, so let me light them up. I think it would look quite interesting at night to have some lighting on the roof around these little clusters of plants and flowers. I must say, overall, this really turned out spectacular. It turned out so much better and so much more usable than I actually had anticipated. So here are the final screenshots of the completed house. This is in roof at night, going down to the basements. And there's, in the early morning light, soft light coming in over the Shire. That's the basement. Anyway, I do hope that you enjoyed this build for the Sims Hobbit House. If you haven't subscribed yet, well, what are you waiting for? And don't forget to click the notifications bell icon and turn on notifications. That way, you will get notifications of all new content that is uploaded to this channel. Also, I'm going to be making these files available shortly, so subscribe and I'll let you know when they are available. Thanks so much for watching this video, and have a wonderful day.